Good morning, everyone. So, welcome to the conference. So, I am Guada Villanueva and I am the conference manager. So, on behalf of Beyond Kilig team, I just like to welcome you and thank you for spending time with us today. So, of course, I'd like to introduce with you my co-host. Let's just see if he's able to join us right now. Hi, Kenneth.
Right. Hi everyone. Good morning. Apologies for some technical glitches. But yeah, I'm here and hopefully my video will be on later. So welcome to Beyond Kilig
Anyways.
Brokenness Conference, a journey to healing and self-discovery through theology of the body. And thank you, Guada, for that introduction. So yeah, I hope all of us would learn and appreciate the TOB teachings from this conference.
Yeah, so there, I hope you won't mind. Like, hopefully later we'll be able to see Kenneth's face. I think, when it comes to online, going online with this conference or event, sometimes it's pretty inevitable to have last minute tech problems or tech concerns or whatsoever. But anyways, just to introduce about theology of the body. So these are composed of the Wednesday audience of Saint John Paul II between 1979 to 1984. So it talks about the biblical reflections on being male and female, and at the same time it talks about four main pillars, which is about a person's identity and purpose, about love and sexuality. So actually, all of the blocks of this conference. So we have four blocks. We have a morning and an afternoon session. For today and tomorrow, it talks about all of these four blocks. So as much as possible, it would be best for you to be able to attend them. Of course, if you're not able to do it live, then you can also watch replay. So all of them will be accessible through the Facebook group. And then at the same time, if you have friends who are still not in the Facebook group but have registered, please let them know that they'll have to join the group to be able to participate in this online conference and watch the replay videos. Okay, so just to mention our promotional partners, we have Alfie, and they promote basically about the family, about life. And then we also have Live Pure Movement, also as our promotional partner. And basically, they promote and advocate living a life of chastity, for and happiness and holiness. Okay, so before we start, we'll ask first the intercession of Saint Joseph for this conference, since today is his feast day. Okay, so here we'll just flash a prayer. So please join us in praying the act of consecration to Saint Joseph. O dearest Saint Joseph, I consecrate myself to your honor and give myself to you, that you may always be my father, my protector, and my guide in the way of salvation. Obtain for me a greater purity of heart and fervent love of the interior life. After your example, may I do all my actions for the greater glory of God, in union with the divine heart of Jesus and the immaculate heart of Mary. O blessed Saint Joseph, pray for me that I may share in the peace and joy of your holy death. Amen. Okay, so to start this conference, we have with us our keynote speaker. So we have with us Father Joel Hasson. So he's a diocesan priest of the Archdiocese of Manila. He finished his studies at San Carlos Seminary and was ordained on July 31, 1996. He also took his further studies at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, where he earned his licentiate degree in moral theology, magna cum laude, working on St. John Paul II's Theology of the Body. Okay, so at present, he is the parish priest of Mary Mirror of Justice Parish in Comembo, Makati. Concurrently, he teaches fundamental moral theology, bioethics, sexuality and integrity, special moral theology, and audiendas on hearing confessions at San Carlos. He also heads the Commission on Family and Life of the Archdiocese of Manila. Father Joel is also the author of Free Love, True Love, and lectures extensively on St. John Paul II's Theology of the Body. There we go. Okay. Hi, Father.
Hi, good morning, Goda. Good morning, everyone. Sa lahat po ng ating mga listeners and watchers. Magandang umaga po and happy feast day of St. Joseph. Okay, so
Yes, you can start, Father.
yes. So I'm first of all, I am very happy to be a part of this conference entitled Beyond Brokenness. No, and I would like to greet all of you and thank all of you and honor all of you for your presence, even though it's a virtual presence. So thank you for joining me this morning. Ano, nakita ko kanina one of our hosts, medyo broken yung kanyang camera, ano. At tamang-tama kasi yung ating pag-uusapan ngayon is beyond brokenness, no? So, I'm happy to share with you some reflections, no? I think the title of the conference is very good, very apt, because whenever we hear the word theology of the body, or whenever we hear the phrase theology of the body, what comes to our mind is, oh, that's St. John Paul's teaching about sex and marriage. Well, yes, it is a teaching about sex and marriage, but more than that. When you look at the theology of the body, it is actually an anthropology. What is an anthropology? It is a study on who man is, on who and why the human person was created in the image and likeness of God. So the whole theology of the body presents to us an idea, a vision, a worldview of who man and woman is. But at the same time, the theology of the body is also a Christology. And what is a Christology? It is a vision of who Christ is. Because Christ is the Word made man, the Word made flesh. And because He is the Word made flesh, through His incarnation, Jesus has become forever connected with our humanness, our humanity. And that's why, if the theology of the body is an anthropology, a way of looking at man, the theology of the body is also a Christology, a way of looking at who Jesus is and how Jesus is related to our humanness and how our humanity is also intrinsically connected and destined to share in the person of Jesus, in the person of the Trinity, in the person of God. Now, the title of our conference is Beyond Brokenness, and I would like to share three simple points on this condition that we call brokenness. I call it the three C's of brokenness. Why three C's? You will know as we go along in this presentation. The first C that I would like to discuss is this. Okay? Brokenness is a part of our human condition. I don't think I have to ask you why. If you are human, kung ikaw ay tao, you know what I mean. We experience brokenness. And brokenness is a part of our human condition. You know, in philosophy, they have a more sophisticated term. Why are we broken? Because the philosophers say we are contingent beings. Now, what is a contingent being? A contingent being is someone or something that is created. We are we cannot exist. So when we say contingent being, it is always in partnership or in contradistinction with God, who is we call it the necessary being. Ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng necessary being? He cannot not exist. And therefore, existence is his very essence. And therefore, because existence is his very essence, God is perfect. He is perfection. Now, the human person, who is the human person? We are contingent beings. We are not necessary beings. We can not exist. And because we were created from nothingness, that means our very nature is not perfect. We are broken by our very nature. And that is why you will see that as a human person, we experience many kinds of evil. Now, because evil is a form of brokenness. For example, sickness is a kind of evil because it is a privation of health. It is a kind of brokenness. And this brokenness is a condition that we need to live with. Ngayon, naririnig natin, sinasabi nila, the COVID-19 virus, it will be here to stay. and we need to live with the COVID virus. It's the same with our brokenness. It is a part of the human condition, and it is something that we need to learn how to deal with and to live with. Sickness is part of our human brokenness. It is the privation of health. For example, loneliness is also a kind of physical evil, an objective evil, because it is the absence of communion. Death is the ultimate objective evil, the ultimate form of brokenness, because it is the privation of life. So I think you're getting my message. Brokenness is a part of our human condition insofar as we are not perfect beings. We are created beings. Okay? And it is something that we need to deal with. Okay? So that's the first C. It is a part of our human condition. Now, there is also a second C, and I call it brokenness is a part of human concupiscence. In the first part, I talked about objective evil. Why do we call it objective evil? Because there is no moral fault involved in objective evil. Wala tayo doong kasalanan because it is a part of our human condition. But moral evil is a different thing because there is already our participation. There is already our will. And that is also part of human brokenness. We call it concupiscence. When God created us, He gave us the gift of freedom. And that is part of who we are as image and likeness of God. We are given freedom. Freedom is the greatest gift that God has given us. But freedom is also the greatest risk that God took in creating us. Why? Because through our freedom, we can say yes to God. But with the same freedom, we can also reject God. And when we reject God, that is where moral evil comes in. That is what we call concupiscence. What is concupiscence? Concupiscence is part of our tendency to sin. And we see that concupiscence is as old as the Bible. When you look at the first book of the Bible in the book of Genesis, what do you see in the first man and woman? Their tendency to sin, to use freedom in a wrong way. They were created good by God, but because of the misuse of freedom, sin entered the picture. So, sabi nga ni John Paul II, yung original justice was disturbed because of the misuse of freedom. And now sin entered the picture. Now again, look at the book of Genesis, no? They were given so much permission. God said, you can eat everything in the garden. But what is the nature of you? What is our human nature? We focus mostly on the prohibition, not the permission. There was only one prohibition. You cannot eat of the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. But our tendency is we focus on the prohibition and not on the permission. And that is what we call concupiscence. No? We don't want to be prohibited. We rebel against the laws of God. That is part of concupiscence. I once saw a cartoon strip of two boys talking to one another. The first friend said, I hate being confined by this fence. I am jumping over it. And the fence is called God's commands. And then the second friend said, wait, it's not a fence. It's a guardrail. But it was already too late. The friend already jumped. Concupiscence contributes to our brokenness. Why? Because we look at God's commands as a fence that restricts our freedom. But no, God's commands are not a fence. It is a guardrail. It safeguards our full flourishing. And this is where St. Joseph, the feast that we celebrate today, becomes very important. Today is March 19. If you read Psalm 19, verse 7, what does it say? The law of the Lord is perfect. It revives the soul. The law of the Lord is to be trusted. It gives wisdom to the simple. Who is Saint Joseph? He is called the just man. Not just a man, but the just man. Why is he called the just man? Because he considers the law of the Lord. He loves the law of the Lord. He follows the law of the Lord. He surrenders to the law of the Lord. He does not look at the law of the Lord as a fence that restricts his freedom. He looks at God's commands as a fence that safeguards our human flourishing. The law of the Lord is perfect. It revives the soul. Now, when we sin, what happens? We experience brokenness, moral brokenness. And therefore, I would like to tell you, my dear friends, that when we sin, we do not only break a law, we actually break ourselves. Sometimes we think that when we sin, God is punishing us. And the brokenness that we are experiencing is the result of God who became angry and therefore he wants to punish us. No, not necessarily. Sometimes our brokenness is a product of our own doing, of our own wrongdoing. When we break the law, we do not, when we sin, we do not only break a law, we actually break ourselves. For example, in the scripture, when Adam and Eve was when they sinned, the Bible said, God said, "From now on you shall labor. From now on, thorns and thistles, the garden will bring you. You will earn your keep by the sweat of your brow." Those are not necessarily punishment of a capricious God. Those can be looked upon as the natural consequences when we break the laws of nature. Okay? In the parable of the prodigal son, when he left the father and took his money, his inheritance, and spent it in loose living, the Bible said he went into a distant land. And when he reached that distant land, there was a famine. Now, some said, oh, God punished the prodigal son when he went to the distant land. But actually, no. Do you know how distant land is translated in the Bible? It was translated as Kora Makra. That is the Greek for the big empty. So the distant land is the big emptiness. The prodigal son went into the land of big emptiness, shallow pleasure, and therefore the famine becomes a natural consequence of pursuing shallow pleasure. Why? Because our hearts are not made for shallow pleasure. Our hearts are made for the infinite. And that is why when you pursue shallow pleasure, you actually punish yourself. It is not God punishing you, you are actually punishing yourself because you are longing for something that will not fulfill you ultimately. So that is also part of human brokenness. We call it moral brokenness, the product of our wrong choices, the product of our wrongdoings. Brokenness is a part of concupiscence. But thanks be to God, there is a third C in our brokenness. Brokenness is healed by Christ. Christ. When you read um, do you remember now when we were in elementary or when we were in grade school, there was a what we call a nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty. Do you remember Humpty Dumpty? The story of an egg. What does it say? It says, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not bring Humpty back together again. Now, it's a beautiful nursery rhyme, but do you know that that nursery rhyme is actually a deep theological lesson? Humpty Dumpty represents all of us, the human person. It says, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. What do you call the sin of Adam and Eve? We called it the fall. And what happened when the human person fell? They were broken into different pieces. just like Humpty Dumpty, broken into different pieces. When Adam and Eve sinned, they had a great fall. They were broken. They were shattered into different pieces. But thanks be to God, Christ came in order to restore us. The nursery rhyme said, all the king's horses and all the king's men could not bring back Humpty together again. No one can bring us back together again. Why? Because only Christ can bring us back together again. And that is the reason why Christ became man. John Paul II said, that is the reason for the incarnation. Remember, in the Theology of the Body, John Paul II spoke of three conditions of man. Number one, the original, our origin. It speaks of the original condition of man when God created him. The second cycle, the second condition is our history. What is our history? The result of our sin, our brokenness. But the third cycle, the third condition, he calls it our destiny. What is our destiny? When Christ came, he will heal us and he will bring us to our destiny. And that is the reason why Christ was incarnated. Why? In order to heal our brokenness. No? The Catechism of the Catholic Church says, Jesus came to restore creation back to the purity of its origin. No? Catechism 2336. Jesus came to restore creation back to the purity of its origin. That is the reason why Christ became man. No? We turned our back on our origin, and so what happened? We became sinful, we were broken. That is our history. But what did Jesus do? He reminds us that God is calling us to a destiny. And what is that destiny? To live our life again, not broken, but this time made whole, redeemed by the grace of God, by the grace of Christ. Christ, the new Adam, who will undo everything the first Adam did. The first Adam failed in showing us who man is. Now, Jesus, the new Adam, will show us what it means to become man. That is the reason why the Catechism says Jesus came to restore creation back to the purity of its origin. Our brokenness is healed by Christ. They say Christ knows our sins, but he calls us by name. The devil knows our name, but he calls us by our sins. That is the difference between Jesus and the devil. Jesus knows our sin. Jesus knows our brokenness, but he heals our brokenness and transforms it. I would like to end with this simple message. Are you familiar with what they call in Japanese the Kinchugi art? The Japanese art of Kinchugi. Now, what is the Japanese art of Kinchugi? It is when something is broken, they would not throw it away. What would they do? They would put it back together by fixing it, by putting it in a gold imbued resin. And therefore, the damaged vessel, who is bound to be discarded and thrown away, will now become transformed into a work of art. If something is broken before, what will happen? It will now become transformed. It will look like a new and beautiful work of art. Yes, you can see still the cracks, the brokenness, but now it is imbued with gold resin. That is who God is. God is the divine Kinchugi master. God's love is like the vein of gold running through our broken humanity. God's mercy is like the vein of gold running through our broken humanity. Usually when we look at ourselves, this is how we look at ourselves. We look at ourselves as broken pottery, okay? Broken pieces of pottery. That is how we look at ourselves. But how does Jesus look at us? He looks at us as something whole and entire. This is how God looks at you. Okay? When we look at the mirror, sometimes we see something broken, but no, this is how Jesus looks at you. He is the divine Kinchugi master. So, are you broken right now? Yes, I am broken. You are broken. We are broken by our human condition. We are broken by our human concupiscence. But thanks be to God, glory to God, because of the mercy of Jesus, because of the grace of Christ, we are broken yet redeemed. We are fallen yet transformed into a beautiful work of art. And that is our destiny. We are not meant to be thrown away. We are meant to live with God in eternity in heaven. Our brokenness is not something that is ugly in the eyes of God. Our brokenness can be transformed. And through that brokenness, we can actually become an agent of healing to our brothers and sisters who are just as broken as we are. My dear friends, look at Jesus when he rose from the dead. He bore in his glorious body the wounds of the crucifixion. And we can say that his body was also broken. The wounds of the crucifixion were still there. But in the wounds of the crucifixion, the light of divine forgiveness shone forth. The grace of divine love shone forth. And through that broken body of Jesus, all of humanity was once more redeemed and transformed. My dear friends, that is the beauty of the theology of the body. It reminds us that sinful as we are, broken as we are, that is not our permanent condition. We have a destiny. And what is our destiny? It is to be lifted up, it is to be transformed, and it is to be healed by the grace of God. And so my final message to all of you, surrender to God's plan for you. That is what Saint Joseph did. He surrendered to the plan of God. And you know, when we surrender to the plan of God, we will not be lacking. We will not lose. I want to share with you this poem given by Bishop Fulton Sheen. He spoke about sanctity and what it means to surrender to God. He said, sanctity is not giving up the world in which Christ said to man, it is exchanging the world in which Christ said to man, give me your humanity and I will give you my divinity. Give me your time and I will give you my eternity. Give me your slavery and I will give you my freedom. Give me your death and I will give you my life. Give me your nothingness, and I will give you my all. My dear friends, like Saint Joseph, let us surrender to God, and in our brokenness, we will once more be made whole. Have a good day to all of you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Father. That is so enlightening. The message that you said, it's very much aligned with the conference. Actually, what you mentioned just tells us the reason for the conference and why it's called Beyond Brokenness. So all of
Yes,
us, I'm sure, can relate to that. That we're all
yes.
broken. Yeah. Okay. So now we will introduce the block. Thank you again, Father.
You're
Okay.
Thank you,
welcome.
Father Joel. All
Yeah.
right, so let's officially start the first healing block. So, feeling the
Mhm.
emptiness within. So, this block is about purpose and it covers topics on grief, depression, and anxiety. We'll also learn about the TOB lesson, God shaped hole in our hearts, which talks about our desires and longings.
Yeah, okay. Kenneth, you weren't able to, properly introduce you a while ago. If you'd want to, like, say something about yourself just so the audience knows. So, yeah, glad that this time around that they can see you.
All right, so hi everyone, good morning. So I'm Kenneth Garcia. I am usually volunteering for LEAP or Life Endeavors and Projects. It's a project under EduChild, and also I co-host for the Joy and Peace podcast, which inspires Catholic singles to enjoy their singlehood while they prepare for marital happiness. So I'm glad to be here, Guada. Thanks for the invite, and yeah, I'm also eager to learn like everyone else on what TOB would mean and what and how I would apply it in my life as well.
Mhm. Okay, so just some conference reminders for everyone. Okay, so one, to be able to participate with via comments, please give access to StreamYard by just clicking streamyard.com/Facebook. And I think in our Facebook group as well, there's a place that it says there we're going live through StreamYard. So you just have to click that so that your name will appear in the comment section, just so that it won't just be plain Facebook user. So sometimes like that, so we can see your name, you have to click on the giving access to StreamYard. Okay, next one. We will be providing you the Padlet link for you to be able to put in your questions for the panel Q&A. So that's how we're going to close the block with a panel question and answer. So as we go through the talks of the testimonial speakers and in the Theology of the Body lesson, you might have questions. So feel free to put that in Padlet so that we can answer the questions later. Another thing, just to let you know, the discussion may have contents about painful emotional experience that may trigger distressing responses. In case this happens, you may stop viewing the content and do activities to calm oneself down. You'll also be flashing some hotlines that you can refer to and contact for help or support. So let me just show that here. There. Okay,
Mhm.
so feel free to take a screenshot of this. It's also posted in our Facebook group in case you'll need to reach out to them for help in case you're triggered during the conference. Okay, so let's start. We will introduce first our first speaker for today. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Okay, so our first speaker will talk about dealing with grief. So Kai Soriano Santa Cruz, she is seasoned in the corporate world with 25 years of experience in local and in multinational companies. She rose through the ranks with a passion for developing people. She is a communication arts graduate from the University of Asia and the Pacific, or UANP, and took humanities in the University of Navarre in Spain. She also completed a management development program in Tokyo, a professional series of courses from the Singapore Management University, and certificate courses in life coaching and art therapy in Singapore. So let's all welcome our first speaker, Kai Soriano Santa Cruz.
Thank you, Kenneth. Hi, Guada. Good morning.
Good morning.
Everyone watching, good morning. I am so happy to be here with you today. I was invited, I think it was last month when I was invited, right? And I was so excited. I thought it was actually Feb 19 that this was going to happen. But I was corrected and they said March 19. And I thought, my goodness, God talaga, He makes everything perfect, perfectly timed. Because again, today we've been saying it since kanina pa, it's really the feast day of Saint Joseph, right? And how apt that I will talk about my father on this feast day. My father is a devotee of Saint Joseph, and I am just overwhelmed with the fact that I get to tell his story. I don't have any slides for you today, but I was hoping to at least show his picture. But let's see if that happens later, right? I loved listening to Father talk earlier. It was so resounding how he said that, you know, God made us in his image and likeness, but we all are on earth and brokenness is just a part of our lives. So, my story, what I will share to you today, is very personal. It's losing a father, and a father who is not just amazing, but perfect for us in every way. It was so difficult to lose him, but you know what? In God's kindness and love, it's a story I love sharing. So let me tell you about our family first. Our family is a very close knit family. I'm the eldest of three girls, and my parents got married when they were a little bit older. Well, not so old, but during their time, I think it was a little bit older, right? So they were, I think my dad was 31 and my mom is about 2 years younger. So my dad wanted to finish architecture first, and he just made sure that he was going to be a good provider for the family, whatever family God was going to give him. So he and my mom had a devotion to, I think it was the church in Manila that they would go to and pray right? And so this was happening. So early in the day, they were already prayerful. But I think they developed in their spirituality when they got married. A lot of miracles happened in their lives. And eventually, my dad not only graduated, but he became the top notcher when he took the boards, the architectural boards, right? So I'm saying that because my dad was pretty exacting of how to live life. He had a bar, and my sisters and I would always kid about this bar that we cannot possibly reach because he's just so, demanding of it. But it's not demanding in a way that he would pressure us. It was demanding in a way that he would say, God put you on this earth for a reason, and you want to maximize that time because your life on earth is very temporary. And in our family, we talk about things very openly, even death. So when my dad turned 60, retirement age was looming. We were telling him, wow, you're going to get to rest, you're going to get to travel more and just spend time with mom, things like that. And he did for a while. He would, in a way, he would not go to the office as early. He would come home earlier than usual, right? But he made sure that whatever time he kept for himself, he devoted in serving the church. He devoted in serving communities. He was asked to design churches all around the Philippines. His pet project is in Lingayen, the Church of the Resurrection, shaped like a dove. He even won an award for that design. So he was amazing in terms of serving not just the family, but the bigger community and really God's family, right? So we were very, at a young age, made aware of the roles and responsibilities that we should have, not just for the family or ourselves, but the community that we were in. And just going back to the whole story, the whole part of dad making sure that we were ready for what life had in store, he made sure that when he was already kind of positioning his life toward his retirement years, he also said that, one day I'm going to go. One day you are going to not have me around, not have mom around, and I just want you to be ready. And of course, because we were raised being able to openly talk about things, it wasn't surprising to us. However, talking about death of somebody you super love, somebody you are so used to having around, isn't easy. And nakakatawa my dad because I think his tactic was, I'm just gonna drill this down and bahala na, right? So we would call family meetings together and he would say, okay, guys, this is the plot where I will be buried, and this is the design of my casket. My tombstone is going to have these words, right? My dad prepared everything. Everything. I guess it was because he was trained to be a planner, also, right? When you're an architect, you kind of need to plan, and you need to plan very perfectly to the last detail. And in my dad's case, he planned even his death to the last detail. But what he made sure of was that he left us with a prayer life. And my dad eventually grew in his devotion of the Divine Mercy. He would pray it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the family. We would have a family rosary every day, no fail. But my dad would pray all the mysteries of the rosary every day. And he would wake up at 3 in the morning to also pray the Divine Mercy again. And eventually, he had a Viber group that would wake up, bigla na lang, 3 in the morning, and they would pray. And my brother-in-law, Carlo, all the way in Lipa, is part of that prayer group, right? He had such a devotion to the Divine Mercy. And I saw how God was also faithful to him. In August of 2021, my dad got sick. In his early days of architecture, he had to visit a lot of job sites. And in those early days, Asbestos was something that they regularly used. Eventually, he had asbestos deposits in his lungs, and the doctor pretty much said there's nothing that we could do about it. He was confined because of pneumonia a number of times, but in August 2021, he was confined at the medical city. He was struggling because of it, because of COVID, right? It wasn't easy. We had such a difficulty. There were no visitors, but so many miracles happened. My sisters got to stay with him. He stayed there for about 5 days. He didn't get into the ICU, but he was having a difficult time. He kept on removing his oxygen. My sisters got so frustrated, you know? And he kept on saying, I still have a meeting on Friday. He was so focused on things that he still had to do. But on the third day, he kind of said just randomly and quite openly, I think mamamatay na ako, he said to my sisters. And of course, because we're quite pragmatic, things like that we take in a stride. My sister called the priest, but there were no assurances. And Father 14 came on a Thursday, I believe. It was a Thursday or Friday. But on that night that he arrived, that was a miracle. He knocked on the door. My sisters were surprised. He was able to give dad his extreme unction, last rites, go to confession, take communion. You can't ever be extra prepared for death, right? My dad wanted us to be prepared all the time, and this was one of those things that there was no do-over. We wanted to make sure that dad was prepared, and thank God that Father 14 came. The very next day, they were praying the rosary. They were praying the rosary, and towards the end, my dad, laying down, looks up and then looks at my sisters and says, Paano yan? I'm already with Mama Mary and Jesus. And he closed his eyes and he passed away. It was as peaceful as we could have imagined. It was more beautiful than we could have ever planned. And when my sisters saw this, they messaged me. It was morning, and I saw the message. I was at home. And when I read that message, I understood how God embraces us, because I suddenly was washed with this love that I can't even begin to describe. This is why I was quite anxious to share this story with you, because there are just some parts of it that I can't describe in words. But I was hugged by God. And instead of breaking down, I had a big smile on my face, because my dad, who was such a devotee of the Divine Mercy and Saint Joseph, got what he wanted all this time, a happy death. And so there were so many miracles around this story. One is my sister, remember, my brother in law based in Lipa. We were worried about her coming over all the way because that lockdowns here and there, roadblocks here and there. But you know what? God made a way. She was at home at the end of her exam. She's a nurse. She's taking her master. She at the end of her exam, somebody came to the door, said, "You know what? I'm on my way to Manila," and suddenly she had a ride. She was in the hospital without wasting any time. When my father passed away, he had the miraculous medal, the brown scapular, the tilma of the Guadalupe, and two caregivers came into the door. And so my sisters introduced her themselves, and one said, "Yeah, I'm Fatima," and the other one said, "I'm Trix." "Oh, Trix, Trixie? No, Mediatrix, right? Mediatrix of all grace." My dad was surrounded by so much love on the day he passed away. So much love and so many miracles because on that same day, my mom woke up around 4 or 5 in the morning with a voice that said to her, "What God had giveth, God taketh away." And with those words, this calming presence existed with her and kind of hugged her. She slept again, and then I had to tell her the news. I called her up, and my mom, just with a brave face, said, "The show must go on, girls. The show must go on." We were hugged by God in a way that I can't even explain. But when you surrender, as Father had mentioned earlier, when you surrender, really surrender, even death can touch you. Even death becomes what it really is, which is a door to the life that each one of us is meant to live. My dad's life was beautiful, but his death, how I wish we all have that grace when our time comes. So there are three lessons, right, that I would like to share with you, leave you with from this story. There's so many more details that I want to share. But for the purposes of keeping time, I'd like to share these three things with you. DAD, in honor of my amazing dad. The first is to have a devotion to the divine mercy. I think I think it's one of those stories that you, if you're not really familiar with it, should learn. It's about Saint Faustina and about Jesus appearing to her and the promises that he gave to her. It's all over YouTube. There are so many resources. Please take the time, especially this Lent, to try and understand them even more. The next is acceptance of God's perfect will. There are things we will never understand. Why my dad? Why did he have to have pneumonia at the time when people were being locked up in their houses? So many questions. But you know what? If it's God's will, it's God's will, right? Finally, the last D, death is a door. We will all face that door one day. Let us all be ready. And we can be ready through prayer. Finally, I'd like to leave you with the sixth promise. There are 14 promises of the divine mercy. And number 6 says, the souls that say this chaplet will be embraced by my mercy during their lifetime, and especially at the hour of their death. God bless you. God bless everyone. And happy, happy feast day of Saint Joseph. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Coach K.
You
That
God.
was great.
Oh, I hope that that was helpful and that made sense. There's just so much that you want to share, but well, that was all. I think I asked Dad to help me give the message. I think that was what he wanted to say too. Thank you,
Yes,
God, for this opportunity, and Kenneth also.
yes. It's very apt since today's Saint Joseph's feast day, and he's also patron for Holy Death.
Mm-hmm.
So there, I think your example just gave us, like how, tips on how we can prepare for that moment, and at the same time, how to see, how we view death as well. Yeah, those are all very helpful. So there, thank you so much, Coach K. And
Thank
for
you.
everyone else, in case you have questions that you'd want to share with us later, as early as now, you can already put them in Padlet. So I'll just show that here. There. Okay, so you can take a photo of, you can scan the QR code or put in the link. It will also be posted in our FB group chat. sorry, in our Facebook page, group, sorry. So
Mhm.
there, so that throughout the talks, you can just put it in.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you have some questions for Kay and for the other speakers, we'll collect them through the Padlet link and we'll have a meaningful discussion during the panel after all speakers have spoken. Okay, thank you so much, Kay. And for our next speaker, so she will be talking about depression and anxiety. So she is Marini Fernandez. She is a graduate of the International Academy of Film and Television. She was a production designer of ABS-CBN's teleserye Araw Gabi in 2018. She gained her experience in the entertainment industry by directing feature and short films. Currently, she founded her advertising video production company that strives to make an impact through the stories they make. In 2019, she shared her story and one of her short films to different universities in Cebu, which helped her inspire those who attended by advocating for mental health and self development. Let's all welcome our next speaker, Marini Fernandez.
Hello. Thank you so much, Guada and Kenneth. Hello to everyone in Beyond Brokenness conference. I see that there's around 194 people on Facebook. So, wow, thank you so much. And I'm really glad to be here. I really appreciate the invite. And hearing from the other speakers earlier, we just had Father Joel, and I really loved what, and of course, Coach Kai, and I loved when Father Joel was sharing about how brokenness is part of our human condition because we're not perfect beings and it's something that we need to deal with, and that God gave us this freedom, and to have that freedom to bring it back to Him, that is very beautiful. And I was also inspired by Coach Kay's speech about her testimony about her father. It was very beautiful. So thank you for sharing. And so today I'll be sharing my story. But first, let me ask the question: have you been told to pray about it or pray harder after sharing your experience about having a mental breakdown to someone? Is there anyone else here that has been told that? And I would say that I have been told that. Like, I've heard so many friends telling me, you know, pray about it, pray harder, especially when I tell them about my mental condition or the experiences that I would experience in that day. I would always feel compelled to say, I'm praying so hard already that every day in the dormitory that I live in, I would pray in the morning, afternoon, and evening, and even after dinner before the oratory gets closed. The director would tell me to leave, politely, of course, because she needed to close the oratory. So, there in that oratory, I would just stay there and just, cry and pray so hard, asking God, like, why am I experiencing so much pain, so much anxiety, so much nothingness, and so much feelings that I wanted him to take it away. But with that experience, and I will share in a bit, that it allowed me to grow closer to him with my experience there. And for those of you who don't know, I actually, before I became a filmmaker and before I graduated from the International Academy of Film and Television for filmmaking, I was in college and I attended college in De La Salle University. I took up BS Psychology and I lived in the women's dormitory across DLSU, which is in Leon Ginto. And you know that every single day in 2016, it just started going a low path that I started feeling feelings of nothingness, feelings of just living, getting by. I didn't feel happy, I didn't feel sad. I was just literally in that level space of just nothingness, and I felt empty, and I felt that I didn't know my purpose. And back then I was praying really hard, like yeah, like going to mass, regular mass every day, and then praying so hard. And then I guess for me, when that started, when I started to feel those experiences, it started like I wanted to control it because a lot of times we're told in our lives that, you know, when you have these feelings of sadness, of anger, of depression, you try to control your feelings, or like try to fix it, or control your emotions, you know. That when we the more we control, the more it gets very overwhelming for us, because the more we try to control it without fixing it or going to the root of the problem and to the cause, it becomes very overwhelming and challenging, that eventually that will burst. And when it explodes, it makes us go down this path of just having ideations of wanting to take one's life. I was able to experience that, and that was where my pain was really coming from, emotionally and mentally. Like, I remembered having feelings of deep and dark emotional sadness, despair, and that, you know, my thoughts were so loud and noisy and overwhelming, that they were all of these emotions at once. And sometimes I even felt extremely guilty because I didn't want to burden other people. I felt that I could take care of it myself, or I could handle it, or I don't need help from other people. So that was where the pain was really coming from. And all at once, I often called that those feelings the low state. So it was all of those feelings that I experienced in college, plus the high state, which for me means like extreme happiness, feeling like I was on top of the world, like I could do everything at once. And I wanted to be in these highs. So because who wouldn't want to feel these highs, to feel happy? But back then I didn't know that this happiness was irrational happiness, that it was just an illusion of happiness, that I didn't feel peace, I didn't feel authentic joy. And it was that kind of happiness that made me want to spend a lot of money on useless things I didn't need, or accept a lot of tasks and projects I could not fulfill in the long run. And, you know, just having that so much excess energy. And on the flip side of this high state, I also experienced like getting really angry and irritated. Like, I would just get certain irritated at certain things for no apparent reason. And it was just very overwhelming at that time. And so those experiences of the highs and the lows, I would experience them every other day. So on one day, I would experience the lows, so the depression, the wanting to take my life. And then the next day, I'd feel so happy, like so energetic. I could do everything. And then the next day, I'd just go back to the lows, and then the highs the next day. And it was just a very tiring cycle for me. It was endless. It was never it was never ending. It was very tiring for me. And so what helped me back then was when I had this friend that told me that, you know, a lot of the residents in this dorm have noticed that you haven't been really yourself. And so I would suggest that maybe you need to see a professional. And in my mind, I'm like, what? No, I'm fine. I can handle it. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need help. Like, all these feelings, they were just really inside me. And I just kept saying that I didn't want to get help. But when I felt this conversation with this friend, that it was just very loving, that she wanted me to really get help so that I can live my life better and I can heal from it. It was very genuine and authentic of her to do that. So I really appreciated that. And so yeah, like one day I told her that sige, I'll see a psychiatrist, and then you schedule it, because she promised she was going to go with me to my first session. And I even kept it from my parents. I didn't tell them that I was going to see one. And I even paid for it with my college allowance, which is quite pricey. But yeah, like ever since I started that step of saying yes, of saying that I needed help, because when I was telling other people, or like when they were experiencing me feeling weird, or like it was no longer me, it was out of concern and worry and love, love that they wanted me to get help. So I was so grateful for that experience. And, you know, many times I've tried numbing the pain, distracting myself. And then I've also tried replacing the pain with positive thoughts. They call it happy thoughts. Just think happy, or like think that other people are suffering worse than you. You don't have to be sad. Why do you have to be sad? You're so blessed. You're given everything. Or even when I tried to focus my emotional pain on physical pain, I have tried self harm. Like, yeah, and it didn't cut or anything, but yeah, like I wanted to feel that physical pain because I wanted to forget the emotional pain at that moment. But later on, that didn't work because it would always come back 10 times worse. And so, yeah, I took that step to get professional help. I had a psychiatrist, a psychologist. Eventually, I started taking medication. And for 6 years, ever since my diagnosis in 2016, I can say that I am currently in my third year right now. And ever since I embarked on my healing journey, so it's my third year to be on a healing journey. And with that healing journey, I really wanted to focus on healing. Since 2019, I focused on strength, on inner strength, on love, on forgiveness, on joy, on trust, living my day each day with gratitude. I started to forgive myself for my past mistakes. I started to accept my brokenness, and within my brokenness, I was able to find that inner peace, that love. Of course, it took time, a lot of time, like a whole year. And I went through it together with some of my friends in this community and this leadership program that I joined. We had goals and daily calls with a coach, which was professional and personal. But then I just felt unconditional love from them wanting to help me get better. And I can see that now I do see the light. Like when you're in that state, in that darkness, you don't see the light. Like all you see is at that moment, like you want it to end because there's so much pain. But when you go through that tunnel, when you go inwards, you accept your feelings, you allow it, you acknowledge your feelings, let them flow, and then you'll eventually heal. Like you allow God to touch your life and heal you together, of course, with your professional mental health people and your support, which is very important. So really, like, we're all a little broken and we have different scars from our past, and it's what we do with it that matters. And we shouldn't let our past dictate our present and our future choices. We need to learn from them. We need to accept them and live in the moment. We have this fear of everything, fear of the unknown, of failure, of everything and anything. But don't let fear get the best of us. We need to learn to accept that fear and change it from fear to face everything and rise. That's what helped me. And I learned to live with self love. I learned to love myself because God loves me. God loves you. I lived my day with gratitude, even when it's difficult, because with gratitude comes joy. And I was grateful for my brokenness because I was a gift. You are a gift. And I also learned to trust and to surrender, to trust in the process. God placed me in that situation for a reason. And perhaps this reason is for me to share my story with you and to the thousands of people I've shared my story with in 2019. And so trust in God's mercy and compassion. Everything will be all right. And so I end with this story that one day I was in the dorm. I was thinking about, taking my life. And so I was going down from the fifth floor of my room. I was going down the stairs slowly, like asking the question, God, why do you want me to suffer so much? Why do you want me to why am I thinking of taking my life right now when you love me, when I know that you love me, but why is it in my mind? It was going on in my thoughts. And so I was going down to I ended up in the second floor because the first floor is where the exit goes out. And in front of our dorm is a street. And that time it was nighttime. So the cars were driving really fast. And in my mind, my plan was to get hit by a car, to take my life because I wanted the pain to go away. And so I was there, about to take my first step to the stairs of the second floor, all the way to the first floor. And then I heard thunder, like loud thunder, like scary thunder, lightning. And I know that I'm scared of lightning and thunder and rain. It was raining so hard that in the end I didn't even go with it. Like I didn't even go out because I was like I would cover my ears with like I'm scared of the thunder, like that, like when we were kids we'd be scared of the thunder. So yeah. And the next day I knew, when I was reflecting, I knew that God knew that I was scared of the thunder and rain. I was not scared of rain, but I was scared of thunder and lightning, and he knew that. And so it was funny to me that he made that happen, so that I, even when I'm in this whole despair situation, there's always hope. And he finds this humor in little things in our little lives, and we need to find that humor because it helps us, like laugh at our everyday life, and that just makes us understand that God really does love me. He really does love you. And you are very much loved. So, because God loves you, you need to learn to love yourself. Ask help from other people. Should you need any, ask support. If you, I would suggest to ask professional help because it's very important so you can heal. And then when you heal, you can share that love to other people because you cannot share love that you do not have, and so that you can serve other people better. So fill your love cup. And so I end with this quote from Pope John Paul II when he said, "The person who does not decide to love forever will find it very difficult to really love for even one day." So, friends, and all the 186 friends in our live stream today, have a great conference. Love, be love, and give love with love himself. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Marini. So here, let me just put up what you mentioned earlier. So their fear, I really like that acronym:
Mhm.
face everything and rise. So we're not just meant to, stay at the bottom of our broken state that we find ourselves in. But yeah, I think the rising part, that's where we will need God's help. Like as you said, sometimes it's not really like just say, okay, got everything. Obviously, we have to also do our part. That's why, do the necessary checks and self care and all that, all the support system we need. But of course, um, not to forget God Himself. That's why we also have the title of our block today, which is filling the emptiness within.
Mhm.
Okay. So
Right.
Yeah,
yeah, I think
thank you
that will.
also, Marini. Yeah,
Thank you.
because
Thank you so
your
much for
message
having
of
me.
love, gratitude that really resounds with us. And yeah, instead of being overcome by fear, we have to face everything and rise. And I think God really showed his love for you. I mean, you underwent a lot, and I think it's the message that he wanted to give you, that yeah, you are loved, and even though you have those situations that you've encountered, we also have to fill our love cup always.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So
Thank you
just
for
I'll just
that.
show some comments from people. Yeah, thank you for joining us. We have here from Anjali. Yeah, there she's
Wow. Thank you,
here in the
Angeli.
story. Yeah. Okay, so there just keep the comments coming. We'll flash that here every now and then so that we know that you're still here with us. Yeah, okay. So in that case, we will be introducing now our next speaker. So yeah, since we've already heard from the two testimonial speakers about grief or about death, and then about anxiety and
Anxiety
depression
and
as
depression.
well. So next one is there, God-shaped hole in our hearts. So like, what does that mean? Or yeah, how do we experience this, and why is it supposed to be, filled by Him only? So yeah, that's the title of our block. Okay, so our speaker, it's Alex Escobar. She's a registered nurse and advocate for immune health. So she's also known as a sensitive makeup artist. She's passionate about developing people and growing safe spaces to have healing and meaningful conversations about truth, beauty, friendship, and life. She's also involved with the EduChild Leap program. She's a facilitator and head trainer. So it's a 7-month course for young professionals that has been ongoing for more than 4 years now. So she also desires to know more about and share authentic love, which led her to also be a volunteer with Beyond Kilig. She also teaches Theology of the Body to graduating students in a private all-girls high school. So, okay, we'll welcome on stage Alex. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I hope you can hear me well. Okay, so my talk will be about God-shaped hole in our hearts. And before I begin, I'd like to invite you to maybe feel free to take a pen or notebook and just take note of anything that might strike you as I go through the slides, because uh, I'm not sure where you're coming from or where you may be going, what you may be going through, but hopefully what I'll share as I go along will be helpful. So we're gonna walk through this together. All right, so I'll begin. All right, so before I start, I just wanted to check in with everybody and ask, how's your heart? How's your heart, everyone? I know that this is still a time of pandemic. It's not easy. I don't know what you've been going through. Listening to the stories of the previous sharers a while ago, you're the only one who knows what you've been going through and what you've been carrying in your heart. So I'm asking you now, maybe you can try to keep in mind the things that you personally list for yourself, the things that you think might be hurting, the things that you might but might you maybe making you say, "Tama na, Lord, I'm kind of tired." Uh, that's why in this next slide, you'll see a. I think it's supposed to show. Yes, it's supposed to show comic. And sorry, I'm very fond of looking at things in Instagram, and I thought it would be extra fun to also share with you all some of the things that resonated with me. So maybe on a lighter note, there's this joke that says here, "Buti pa ang gas nagmamahal." And sometimes I guess you think, um, with everything that's happening, with everything that's going on in the world, so much uncertainty. Um, I don't know if because of COVID you've experienced loss. I don't know if you've lost people, even pre pandemic, if you've lost them because of misunderstandings or because of death. Um, I'm just saying these things because it's something that we actually have to bring to Him. And I know it's not easy, and it's not something that you can do with a snap of a finger. It's something that you have to work on every day. And that's why I'm going back again to this question, like, why are you here? Maybe some of you, I've heard Might be some students who were requested to attend this conference, maybe a friend invited you to watch it, or maybe you were curious to know if ever something might be calling you to explore and have that dialogue about brokenness, perhaps with him and in your faith. Um, so these are just some prompts that I wanted to bring up, maybe for you guys to consider, because for sure, just like what Father mentioned, um, it's not just, even though it may seem very empty and hard, it's not just all meaningless. And that's why we're going to review some things, hopefully, that can help give us reminders about that, about the call to something more beyond brokenness. And here I hope you can see this text, and I'll just read it if you don't mind. So this is just something, a personal reminder that was very helpful to me, and I'll just read it to you guys too because it might be helpful to you. So it says here, be careful of all that can block that personal contact with the living Jesus. The devil may try to use the hurts of life and sometimes our own mistakes to make you feel it is impossible that he really loves you. So this is a danger for all of us. And it's so sad because it is completely opposite of what he is really wanting and waiting to tell you. Not only that he loves you, but even more that he longs for you. He misses you when you don't come close. He thirsts for you. He loves you always, even when you don't feel worthy. When not accepted by others, even by yourself, sometimes he is the only one who always accepts you. So you don't have to be different for him to love you. You don't have to be perfect. Only believe you're precious to him. Bring all your suffering to his feet. Only open your heart to be loved by him as you are. He will do the rest. Initially, when I read this, and maybe before when I wasn't so very familiar with theology of the body, there was a bit of resistance. And maybe I thought, is there something wrong with me that I don't feel like this? I feel like there's a bit of doubt when I read this because I would think, if that were the case, why did you make me suffer so much? Or I see suffering around people that matter to me, so why do you make this happen? Why do I feel alone? And I realized that I was just keeping that thought to myself, and I really didn't really try having a dialogue with him about that. And then, so in this next slide, yes, I hope you can see the credits. You should check out these credits to the owners. They do really amazing work. But here in this slide, I hope you can see that to the left, there's a comic of a person looking at his piggy bank, at his cell phone, and then thinking, Lord, what are you trying to teach me? And then here to the right, there are some words written down on a paper that says, I can't understand why I am how I am. Who am I? What am I supposed to be? Perhaps you can imagine, take some time to imagine now, if you were in that person, the protagonist in the comic, how would it look like? What are the things that you're dealing with now? And maybe to the right, maybe what are some questions that you might actually be wanting to ask him that you haven't really had time to ask him yet, or maybe that might be uncomfortable for him to ask, might be uncomfortable to ask him about. So I know it's not easy to think about these things, but that's why I'm walking you guys through this. And then that's why I was asking myself, what are your true colors? Sino ka? And kasalanan ko na naman. Sometimes I realized that perhaps I felt that resistance because I was thinking more of things in the sense that seeing the frame more of all the things that I did wrong, all of the weaknesses and things that I felt weren't enough for God, seeing him more as somebody who was trying to catch me with the mistakes that I made, that if I didn't do enough, then he wouldn't bless me enough. Not so much, not with so much trust or not with so much vulnerability. And I realized that it was because I was a bit more preoccupied on my weaknesses and with the things that I was struggling with, because I think one of the things that I find beautiful about this conference is when you hear the testimonies and the stories, you find out you're not alone. And even though people may seem to have some things together, everybody goes through each personal struggle. And this is something that I really say to help console myself and maybe others too, that each person's suffering is very personal. And only God knows what's in your heart. And sometimes, as we get lost in that struggle, we forget that we are more than our weaknesses, than the sum of our failures. And He's the one, like what Father mentioned, the devil calls us by our sin and makes us think that we are just our sin, but He calls us by our name. And are we letting Him call us by our name? And so, for those of you who might be fond of Filipino cinema, this very famous scene that I get really amused by. And I just put it here because sometimes I'm thinking, um, is this something that I'm saying more for myself in a more defensive way? Because maybe I'm kind of nervous to talk to him about stuff that are important or that I'm hurting about and that I'm holding on to, and I'm not letting him in that. And this brings me to this next slide here, which kind of has a formula that I found really interesting. We had some friends doing the consecration to Mama Mary, and then this was a formula actually shared by Saint Maximilian Kolbe, and this is like a big W and a small w and an S. So what does that actually mean? The big W stands for God's will, the small w is your will, and the S means sanctity or like heaven. So I found it really cool because God who made you without you cannot save you without you. So I hope that makes sense. So essentially, God loves us enough to not take away our freedom. He doesn't force us to love Him. He wants us to be able to love Him freely. I guess just like any of you, like if you like somebody, you wouldn't want them to you wouldn't force your crush to like you, right? I mean, that wouldn't be love anymore because there's no freedom and truth in that. So as much as you want for that to happen, um, there's no true love if there's no FTFF. And one of the speakers will be getting into that, the components of what makes true love true love. So you guys tune in for that later on, but I'm just hinting at it a bit. And then here, I'm just going to read this quote really quickly, I think, which will be echoed also by another speaker. But man cannot live without love. And that's true. And that love is actually, as was shown in the next slide with the comic that you see, it's actually all of the love that we see in the world is a reflection of the true love that we long for. I know I had some students who would tell me about how sometimes when we're talking about taking care of ourselves, other people, and the world, sometimes when you're standing in front of a beach or um, if you're looking at nature, sometimes you feel like there's a call to more, something that's beyond you, something that um, you know is beyond what you can expect or find, even in people that you love. And that is that restless feeling that only God can fulfill in you, that the most perfect and true love is purified and ordered through His love. So in this comic, you see, let God's light shine through you. And that's sort of the whole purpose of why we're here, because we see and love people through Him and with Him. And we also help others through our own personal sufferings and takeaways. We help shine that light to them because we have stories that we only can tell ourselves. And He made you that unrepeatable gift. He made you have that voice that only you can share. Just like how Marini and Coach K shared a while ago, I'm sure you have all of your stories about moments wherein you felt more hope or you felt that there's really more to all of this, and that you want to share that hope with others because of the things that you learned yourself. And yes, just to credit to the owner for the comic, it's kind of hard for me to pronounce, but Ar- Architectuclid is the is the artist who is the in charge of the comic a while ago. So that's why it brings me to this slide here, and one of the main points, which is nothing is ever wasted when you give it to God. I know it may sound obvious, but when you actually break it down and you take time to unpack it, uh, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that you have to be mindful about. And I'll go through this in the next slides after. So here in this slide, you can see I'm actually using some of the pictures which were made by the awesome Beyond Click team. It says here, love gives courage to be beside our beloved, especially in their dark hours. And then I realized, paano ba to if you reverse it? Do I also allow people, because it's two-way, right? You love, but at the same time, you have to let others allow themselves to love you. So do I allow others and God to love me, especially when I'm going through a difficult time? And that's why it brings me to this quote here. And I'll read it for you guys in case you can't see properly. It says here, daring greatly means the courage to be vulnerable. It means to show up and be seen, to ask for what you need, to talk about how you're feeling, to have the hard conversations. And that's why I want to ask you guys, how are you like this when it comes to um, maybe the people, like first to yourself, first to yourself, and then to God? Like for those of you who have a personal relationship with God, or maybe those of you who are still exploring that and maybe think that there are things which might be um, causing some resistance to that, I invite you to think about this quote and see maybe are there portions here which you can explore further. Because yeah, how can we have a dialogue with someone if we're also not showing who we really are and the vulnerabilities that we are carrying? And in the next slide, yes, same creator too. Sorry, kind of spammed this page because a lot of his comics resonated with me and kind of matched with the talk. Uh, yeah, I could really relate to this. It's like sometimes people tell me, how do you pray when, I don't know, maybe it's not easy. Maybe for others, it seems very easy for them. Maybe they, for some reason, they find it easier to connect with God and to not be as angry or hurt or confused and offer things up. But prayer, even just telling God, I'm having a very hard time praying and I don't want to pray because I'm tired or I don't have any energy, or I'm mad at you and I'm making tampo, I don't want to pray. That in itself is a prayer, it's a start. So I don't know, as you're looking at this comic strip now, maybe what are the things that you would want to tell him, or if not him, maybe yourself, like maybe to ask for the grace to have that conversation with him. Just one or two things that are at the top of your head as you're going through this conference. Maybe you can take it note. You can take it in your note or in your device. And so, yes, it went back to the side of nothing you give to God is ever wasted, because sometimes we have to check ourselves if it's ourselves who are holding ourselves back from maybe forgiving ourselves, from letting God forgive us. And that's why I said there's this line here that says, my Wi-Fi connection ba? Like usually, I don't know, when you go to an establishment or a house, sometimes it's one of the first things you ask. And that's why I'm asking you to, do you guys have, are trying to have that Wi-Fi connection to God? Or is there a disconnect? And oftentimes that's really the case, and that's quite normal. And that's why I have some words here that says lukewarmness. What does that mean? It can mean maybe not really having any gana to pray, or feeling a distance with him, not really feeling any feelings or a consolation when you're praying. So you're feeling that, is there something wrong with me? Does God not love me? Um, Maybe if you have a spiritual director, I invite you to talk to that person about it. But in the interest of time, maybe I can mention a video that you guys can check out that might be helpful for you. This is something that was very helpful for my students. It's actually from YouTube. It's from Ascension Presents, and it's called Finding God in Darkness. There, the priest, Father Mike, talks about the different struggles in prayer and how different saints, actually, and normal people, everyday people, the different kind of struggles that they go through, and sometimes how God will maybe not put consolation in prayer there to purify it, so that you choose Him for His sake and not just for His gifts. But yeah, I won't be able to get into it now. But again, I'll repeat that it's from Ascension Presents Finding God in Darkness. And another really, really good video that you guys can watch also is called What Does Surrender Actually Look Like? And I hope these two resources can help you in your prayer life too, hopefully. And then let's go to the next slide. Don't worry, I'll be mentioning these videos again when we go to the panel discussion. This next slide is very straightforward, but sometimes I was laughing at it. I was like, what are the things that I'm holding on to that are maybe preventing me from holding on to him? Because, right, if you hold on to something, you can't see what's inside, and you'll just, who are you holding on to? You're just holding on to yourself. So you'll feel alone. So even no matter how much somebody tries to reach out to you, if you don't let them hold your hand, oh, you'll still be holding that alone. And I know it's not easy, but maybe it could be easier to first check, what are these things possibly that I'm holding on to? And for those of you who received communion, I was thinking, oh, nga, no, that's kind of true. Like, we asked to receive him, but in order to do that, you have to open our hands, like both hands. You have to open up to him and let him put himself there in our hands. He trusts us to let us hold him and to receive him. And so that was just something that I was thinking about as I saw this comic. So maybe what are things that you're perhaps tired of holding on to and that you want to try to let go? Of course, this won't happen overnight, but maybe you can list one or two things, asking him for his help, because pagod na, or as we say in Bisaya, kapoy na, Lord, tama na. And this is very interesting. Another quote from around, and I think this is one of the things which stops a lot of people from doing something. It's like, yes, Lord, I want to try, or make, yes, maybe these are good things to think about or aspire for, but there's something holding me back. And a lot of times it can be shame, or maybe reservations of knowing stuff about ourselves. And that's why here it says, if you put shame in a petri dish, it needs 3 ingredients to grow exponentially. And first is secrecy, second is silence, and third is judgment. So if you put the same amount of shame in the petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive. So I remember hearing in a meditation once that when you sin, the devil removes any shame or inhibition that you might have. And so you forget that maybe that you love somebody. Sometimes I try to reframe it as, imagine if there's somebody hurting you, you wouldn't want it to be more of like them being worried that you caught them hurting you, right? It's more of like you'd want them to not do it because of love, not because of fear. And so in the same sense na, for those of you who might be familiar with confession, when you want to go to confession, there's always that shucks. The devil is a master in this, in letting you keep things in secrecy, in silence, and judgment, like self-judgment. I don't know, maybe some people were not very kind to you and judged you about things that you might have not been very proud to do, but do you want to still stay in that space? And do you think it's just that you're kept in? Because there's more than that. There's more than secrecy, silence, and judgment. And there's more than empathy. In fact, sorry. Um, yes, here. Thank you. In fact, it says here, shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot survive empathy. But in confession, for those who are familiar with confession, there's grace. And that grace means that all of your mistakes now serve a purpose instead of serving shame. And I guess it's very timely because of Lent. Um, and now, hopefully, things are a bit, safe but still relaxed in some churches that allow for confession compared to before. I think one of the very interesting things about the lockdown is that it makes people more mindful about when they interact and go out with others. And so, for those of you maybe who have not had the chance to go to confession or mass in quite a while, I invite you to maybe consider doing so, because I used to not like confession. Actually, until now, I still get very nervous when I line up or I think about going to the priest. But actually, confession is a sacrament that God gave. It's a gift more than empathy, and it's the place where you can find this only unique one of a kind peace on earth. For the restless soul, it's God's warm, peaceful, and forgiving embrace. And we're a body soul component. For those of you who um, know, like, we have a body and soul, and it heals us in all those ways because we get that reassurance from the priest, who is the representative of God, that he was able to forgive our sins in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And you get to hear that instead of just thinking, did God really forgive me or not? Am I worthy? And then he also gives you something, like, in the same way that if you might be familiar with love languages, for me, I kind of think of it as it's an apology language. There's somebody who made, like, a doctor who made 5 love languages, something also to really, really cool to check out. There's also apology languages. And for me, God knows how wounded and broken we are, but he sees us beyond that, and he gave this way for us to be able to reconcile with him. And what's really awesome is that actually, after you confess your sins, he forgets about it and he gives us a chance to begin again. So our sin is erased and through the confession, because we acknowledge and bring it to him, and we realize that we are more than that. At the end of the day, who we are really his children. And that's why I want to highlight this point as I'm near the end of my talk, is that the human being is a single, unique, and unrepeatable person. Someone thought of and chosen from eternity. Someone called and identified by name. And that's why I'm asking you guys now, do you believe this for yourself? Or maybe this is something that you might want to take time to process and think about, and maybe try to find hope for and in. And yes, this is actually one of the really, I think, one of the posts that had the most engagement in our Beyond Kilig page. And I'm tying this talk also back to St. Joseph. Shout out to him. And it's kind of funny because it's just blank, right? I mean, St. Joseph is sort of known for his silence. And that's something that I'm inviting you guys to consider today also in this talk about God-shaped hole in our hearts. So, yeah. May I have the next slide, please? Yeah, this is one of my favorite lines that I've read from one of the books that I had. But as I was trying to look for a quote to share with you, this is the one that was the most compact to share. And this is something that I've been asking myself too, because I know this is something I have to work on more. Do I listen with the same passion with which I want to be heard? And I'm relating this to St. Joseph. Sorry, I have a little St. Joseph here. I'm relating this to St. Joseph because I think he's one of the best examples of somebody who really carved out space for God to talk to him, because I know I'm guilty of sometimes monologuing with God. It's like more of like, oh, this is what I need. I don't understand, but I think, do I actually give him a chance to try to talk back to me? And do I actually allow him to tell me things, and not just that, for me to listen to it? And here, maybe I'll just read a bit from some of the text here in connection with that. It says here, have you seen with the eyes of your soul how he looks at you with love? Do you really know the living Jesus? Not just from the books, but from being with him in your heart, because at the end of the day, it is a relationship. And I know it's cliche, but if you don't give a chance at that, it will be very difficult to understand. So have you heard the loving words he speaks to you? And this is something that I struggle with, and maybe for those who might be struggling with it also, it's okay to ask for grace, because it's really a gift. It's a mystery. Suffering is a mystery. Faith is a mystery, but it's also a gift, and you can ask for it because he is longing to give it to you. Until you can hear Jesus in the silence of your own heart, you will not be able to hear him saying, I thirst. Never give up this daily intimate contact with Jesus as the real living person, not just the idea. So, how can we even last one day without hearing Jesus say, I love you? Impossible. Our soul needs that as much as the body needs to breathe the air. If not, prayer is dead. Meditation only thinking. Jesus wants you each to hear him, speaking in the silence of your hearts. So, as I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, am I doing this? I know for some people who might be struggling with a disconnect, it might seem overwhelming, but see what you can do every day, personally, what you can. That's why here I put a question mark. Do you think it's possible to carve out time for silence, to connect, to have that quality time? I know that I can be very guilty about distracting myself and just, using the phone or work as an excuse. But just like how maybe you appreciate how people try to make quality time for you, try to see, do I also do this with God? Maybe all of the hurts that I have with him are difficult to resolve because it's super bitin. I don't really have enough time to have a meaningful conversation with him, or a hard conversation with him about the things that I kind of know I need to talk about with him. And I'm bringing this back to Saint Joseph again, but reading this here first. This beautiful quote from one of my favorite saints, Saint Jose Maria Escriva. It says here, to be happy, what you need is not an easy life, but a heart which is in love. Because, right, life is not easy. I know it's kind of like the Alex. Of course, life is not easy, but you don't have to suck yourself alone. You don't have to be alone carrying that. I think one of the most difficult things is feeling like no one else is there for you, or that no one else can understand you. And people may be well-meaning, and I completely agree with what Marini said. You also have to exhaust all human means and see what are the things that God gave you through your agency that you can do to help try to improve your life. Because, right, you were the one who God gave you the freedom to be able to choose and do good, to strive for greatness and excellence. But at the same time, it can be very heavy, and you won't be able to feel free if you live life more out of fear rather than love. And by sort of reminding yourself that stripped away out of everything else, like you who's listening to now, I don't know if you are a son, a daughter, grandparent, parent. Do you know who you are outside of your family structure or society? Like, even if you fail people or even if you disappoint them, do you know who you are? Because that's one of the things that Theology of the Body gives us as a beautiful reminder that we are enough just as the children of God, and that we are called to love. And one of the people who gave that example the best was Saint Joseph. And I know I didn't know a lot about him before. I had to kind of study about more, I read more about him because of friends. Because how can you know and love something if you don't take the time to study and understand just how you'd want people to also try to take the time to know you too. So, one very interesting takeaway that I had about Saint Joseph was yes, the martyrs' deaths and sacrifices were very significant, but more than their deaths and dying as martyrs, Saint Joseph, by living his life, emptying himself out of love, through the little acts of love every day, it was of so much more infinite value than just giving up your life. Not to make it seem like the martyrs' deaths were insignificant, but it's to show us that, it's actually possible to live your life freely out of love and with love, and to connect all of those sufferings and things that we don't understand. It doesn't have to be meaningless if we attach it and also offer it up to God too. And that's why here I'm going back to the slide again. You are a single, unique, and unrepeatable person that God thought of. There's no other you in this world. And I guess it's really a very mind-blowing thing to think about. You were chosen from eternity, someone called and identified by name. That's why the talk is called God-shaped hole in our hearts. Because I think if you talk to every single person, there will be that restlessness, right? But that's not the end of things. You're called to more than that. And perhaps there's so much mystery in the world. And one of the things that gives me consolation is that at least I know if I'm able to go to heaven, sana, I can ask God all of the questions I have about everything that I'm not sure of. And I'm sure He's going to be able to answer me. Maybe as one of my takeaways for the talk too, I can invite you guys to read this really beautiful piece by this artist called Nightbird. She was the famous singer who got, I think, the golden ticket, and she also sang the song "It's Okay, It's Okay," and she wrote a very beautiful piece about suffering called "God is on the Bathroom Floor." And maybe you can read it for those of you who are struggling with going through these. Perhaps that can help you. But more than anything else, I hope that listening to this portion and walking through the slides that I shared with you guys, I hope helped in some way for you to be able to leave that and start conversation and dialogue with him. As I'm wrapping up this talk, maybe you can try to tell him about one or two things that you'd like to talk to him about, or things that you'd like to work on. And I'm very excited for you to hear what else we have to share in theology of the body. We can't possibly put everything together like in one day. That's why I think being able to learn about theology of the body really helped give me hope to learn more about authentic love, not just with God, but also with God, and through that to other people who matter to me. And so I hope that you were able to help some helpful takeaways. And maybe I will end on the note about surrendering to God and letting Him access things in our hearts, because that's something that I personally struggled with. And maybe you can read more about it in the video about what does surrender actually look like in Ascension Presents. But basically, what Father Mike in that video was saying is, at the end of the day, yes, if I offer up something to God, it doesn't necessarily mean that He'll take it away. Maybe sometimes He will. But more often than not, sometimes we're still stuck with that cross or that suffering. But it's not because He doesn't care or He doesn't love us. But just like what Father mentioned before, goes beyond that. He still keeps our freedom, because if he didn't keep our freedom, he would have just removed all of the suffering. But then we wouldn't be able to be free in that manner if we couldn't choose to just do good and there was no evil. So he comes into our suffering and he transforms it. But the question is, do you let him have access to that? And sometimes I would think, if I let God have access to it, does it mean he'll take it away? Sort of like, how Abraham and Isaac, how God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. And then you think, oh, will God also ask me to do that if I try to give something to him? But no, actually, by entrusting ourselves to him, we will be able to find rest and not be alone. And our hearts will be able to find that rest in him that only he can give. And I know that's something that you have to work on every single day, but something that's definitely worth trying for, because we are called to love, and we are the unrepeatable gifts that we can also be to other people, to be the change and the answered prayers to others that maybe God is calling us to be. And so I hope that was helpful for everyone. We're going to be moving on to the panel discussion next. If you have any questions, you can just leave it you can leave it in the link that was left by the hosts. But thank you so much for listening, everyone. And I hope that St. Joseph will be able to help us with all of our intentions and that we can rest with him today.
Okay, thank you so much, Alex. All right. So, we'll just go ahead, Kenneth, if you'd want to mention something.
All right, thank you, Alex. So, I would say it's bitten. So I think we look forward to more TOB lessons, hearing from you. So I think there are a lot of lessons that we could apply there, like realizing our identity and really feeling that restlessness in our soul. So it's really God who would point us to that fulfillment. So thank you so much. And I think our attendees would also look forward to hearing more about TOB. Okay, so before we proceed to our panel discussion, we'll have a 2-minute break. We would also like to remind everyone to put your questions on Padlet. So the link is posted in the comment section and it's flashed also here. You could take a photo or scan it to your QR code scanner. And we'll also be playing a video. So, Guada?
Yeah, so during that quick break, while you guys put in your questions in Padlet, and take some water or whatsoever, we'll just show a video about Beyond Kilig and our activities last year. So actually, this weekend celebrates our anniversary. So Beyond Kilig is 1 year. Okay, all right. Okay, so there, that's our video. Before we proceed with the panel discussion, let us just we will be bringing back in our speakers a while ago, who will be the panelists, and then we'll also be adding in another panelist, which is who's a psychologist. So his name is Floyd Batombakal. He is he's practicing in the fields of counseling and in clinical psychology. He has been working with adults and adolescents on mental health issues and life and career concerns in private practice, educational, and corporate setting. He obtained his MA in clinical psychology from UST in 2018. From the same university, he obtained BS in pharmacy in 2004 and finished education units in the Philippine Normal University in 2007. So, in his free time, he tinkers with anything he can get his hands on or looks for a very good zombie movie. Okay, so we'll put in all of our speakers for the panel discussion. Okay, so here's Mr. Floyd and Coach K, then Marini, there, and then Alex. Okay, so yeah, I think this time around we have everyone. Wait, let me just flash again if you guys haven't placed in yet your questions. One moment.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we've been
So,
receiving a lot of questions. So thank you for active participation. So hopefully we have enough time to address those questions. If not, we will make sure to get back to you. So we have also a debriefing form later if you want to share your feedback or your thoughts. So we'll make sure that everything would be accounted for.
yeah, okay. So for our first question, wait, let me just flash that. Okay, so here's one of them.
Okay, for the first question, how do I find closure and healing from a sudden or unjust death of a loved one? How do I make sense of anger towards others and God?
If I may just offer my simple answer to this, I think one of the things that's very difficult about something sudden and something even unjust is when we look at it through our own limited eyes. When we see something as humans, as people, the initial reaction is really revenge, right? How dare they? How could they? It's very difficult. And I can honestly, sincerely see how that is because in my own family, in my in-law side, there was a murder that happened and was not easy to understand. But the reason why I am able to talk about this now is because through the healing, we understood that surrender is what the key is for us. I mean, Alex was talking to us about surrender earlier, and here surrender means rather than focusing on the limitations of our human weakness, we offer it to God. And how do we even begin to do that? By looking at Jesus. What did Jesus go through at the last days, in his last moments? The injustice of our God being spat on and judged. Mama Mary was on the cross and she was there. So for anyone who is dealing with this, really, I think journey with Mama Mary and talk to her and see what she can say to you so that you can not really understand the situation, because I don't think we can in this earth, but at least come to terms with the permissive will of God in that situation. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Coach K, for sharing about that, about insights to this question. Okay,
Okay.
I'll go with the next one. Or would anyone want to add something? Yeah,
Okay,
go
so
ahead.
Floyd,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for inviting me here. And I would like to add to what Coach Kay said. No, and I'm also going to tie it up with what I heard earlier, that um, God will give us the grace. At the same time, we also need to work with that grace. No? So half of it or part of it will be on our end as well. No, I think these are two related questions. No, anger, finding closure and healing from an unjust death. But I'll try to start first. Hopefully, I can explain this quickly. I'll try to start first with death, no, grieving and death. Um, Usually, these are the stages when we when we experience death of a loved one, especially someone very close to us. No, a person, hindi naman to in order ha. A person may experience number one denial na I cannot believe that this person is gone. Then next is the person. It's normal to feel anger. Anger towards whom? Can be towards the self, towards the person who died, pwede rin, or other people, and sometimes also anger towards God. No? So that's part of the grieving process. No? How long will that take? It will depend on on each person. No? But let me get back to that later. The third one that you may experience is bargaining. No? Yung parang, if I even though we know that it won't happen, but we still feel that I will do everything just to get that person back, even though we know it's not going to happen. No? So that's part of the grieving process, and also yung very deep sadness for the loss of the person. We will experience that. And after experiencing all of these things, that's when acceptance comes. No? So hindi naman siya in order, yung mga previous stages na yon. But um, let's just try, what I'm trying to say is grieving is a process. No? Mas mahihirapan tayo pag nag-shortcut. Doon tayo mas lalong nagkakaroon ng problema pag nagkaroon ng shortcut sa process, a natural process like grieving. Now, what's very important for grieving, we have to allot time to grieve. Now, for example, marami kang schoolwork, marami kang work. No? What some people do is they allot, for example, 2 hours per week lang. No? Just to go over yung mga possessions of the person na namatay, pictures, etc., arrange those things, no, and or put them in a box, no, while remembering the good times with them, no, and sometimes crying too. And then after those 2 hours, ginagawa nila. This is just an example, they schedule something with another person that they can get out of, para they don't spiral down. No, kasi kung marami nga silang ginagawa, sasabihin nila wala akong time to grieve eh. But then kailangan kasi magkakaproblema tayo pag sinupress natin yan, because it's a natural thing, no? Now, pag yung anger towards God, how do we deal with that when we are grieving? How do we deal with the person we are angry at? Kakausapin natin siya and tell that person why we're angry, di ba? That's the something na parang mas logical na gawin. Pero syempre, pag sa tao, mahihiya pa tayo or may konti pang hesitations. But then, the good thing about talking to God about why we're angry with Him is that He won't judge us, no? Because He knows what we're going through, no? So how are we going to deal with our anger with God? Talk to Him, tell Him why we're angry, and He will understand that, no? Let's talk to Him and explain to Him, this is what I feel, and can you help me with this because I'm angry at you right now, and He will understand, no? Now, dun sa sudden death and violent death of a person, that adds another layer to the grieving process, no? So, first, of course, we're going through the grieving process na. If it's a family, try to also practical things, no? Try to also support each one, no? Try to be sensitive about what each one needs. Now, as we try to support our family members, try to be observant as well, no? Sino dun yung nagkakaroon ng mga reactions na, for example, it is very dysfunctional, no? Meaning, not dysfunctional na mali, but yung hindi na niya magawa yung mga bagay na dapat niyang ginagawa, no? Hindi na niya dati na ma-manage naman niya yung emotions niya, and right now, yung mga outburst, it's affecting himself, herself, and other people na, no? So, tingnan natin yung mga symptoms. These are the 4Ds, no, that we can look at. Ano yung level ng distress? No? Sobrang taas ba? Hindi niya makayanan. Next is dysfunction, meaning yung mga daily things na nagagawa niya at dapat niyang gawin, na dati nagagawa naman niya, hindi na niya magawa. No? Hirap na. Deviation, ito bang tao na to or ako ba, is this my usual self? Okay? Parang hindi. Or parang pag naka-experience ako ng ganitong setback, for example, for the day, I don't expect a person to react that way naman. No? And this is not how I usually react. The number four is duration. Wait, nangyari na to like a month ago, but yung pain, the pain level, or a few years ago, but the pain level, instead of going down, sa grief kasi, natural course ng grief is, the pain will not go away completely in a short time. Kahit na, I've seen people grieving for 20 years, no? 5 years, even man 2 years, no? 1 year. So it will depend on from person to person. Pero the trend is, even if the pain is there, bababa siya over time, no? Pero kung yung pain tumataas, okay, wait, kung ganito yung nangyayari, baka naman we might need professional help, lalo na kapag intrusive yung thoughts, meaning hindi naman natin gustong isipin, pero biglang nagka-flashback or sa dreams, no? Or nagre-react yung katawan natin ng wala namang ibang medical conditions, no? Like sumasakit ang tiyan, sumasakit ang ulo, or something that gets reminded. Kasi that can be psychological trauma na rin, no? And we might want to ask for professional help for that one. No? So, support is, of course, number one. Besides yung spending time for grieving, the other one is, this is a time that the family members can really, really need to support each other and then be observant of others and of ourselves as well. Pag yung symptoms, masyado na siyang, yun nga, yung 4Ds, distressing, yung dysfunction, deviation, or duration, maybe it's time to seek for professional help. Okay, so that's what I can.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's a lot that we can also take in to remember those things, and also the grieving process that you said that there's steps to it, which we'll all have to experience. But of course, we're not alone in that. Yeah. Okay, we'll go with our next question. Is it true that when it comes to healing, to start is the hardest? If this is true, why? And what are concrete steps to start my healing?
I'd like to answer this question.
Okay.
So, yes, it is difficult to start at first. And most of the time, because a lot of people don't see courage and vulnerability as something that is necessary at that point. Like, a lot of the times, they're scared to ask help, to want to seek help, because they're scared of the stigma and the taboo around that. And if like what happened to me, I didn't ask help immediately. I didn't want it because I thought that I could handle it at that moment. But once I started to see that step, it was hard and difficult, yeah. But when I got the courage to, it really changed my perspective. So, what are the some concrete steps to start your journey? The first would be to like reflect. What worked for me was, a lot of people saw what happened and experienced with me, so they told me about it, that they experienced me at a different level compared to before. I was very low and different. So when I got that information, I processed it. I reflected on it, and then when my friend suggested that, maybe it's time to get professional help, then yeah, that's when I said, sige, I'll go na lang. I'll go to that professional help because I wanted to be helped. So I guess one of the steps here is it to want to be healed, because you can't you can't be healed if you don't want it. Anyone who wants to help you can't help you if you don't want to be helped. And I think this is the same with love. And a while ago I was explaining the love cup. So I'd like to explain this, if I may, the whole metaphor of the love cup. So oftentimes when we feel empty or sad or tired or nothing, that's because, as a metaphor, our love cup is empty. So one thing about this is that we're giving too much love to other people. We think we're giving too much love, too much of ourselves to other people, and that we need to receive that love, and we feel that we should receive that love, and we can't give anymore. That's why we get irritated, we get tired, we get empty. So if we start to fill in that love cup with love, and to make it overflowing, because when you make it overflowing, that's when you can share that love to other people. So I guess it's same here. When you want to start that healing process, you need to reflect, to be aware, to have that um courage to want to be helped, and then eventually start to learn the process of filling your love cup and making it overflowing so you can share it to other people. So I guess that's what happened to me. So that worked for me. It might not work for you, but try it out. So I guess Floyd would like to answer this. Would you like to answer this? To add on to this?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Marini. I'll just add just one thing, because I think that's a very good, that those are very good tips and steps. No, just one question that I always ask. Okay, when I talk to someone who is starting a healing process, I always ask the person, okay, what do you call someone who is in front of me right now, who has gone through these difficult moments, and that now wanting to face it and do something about it? Anong tawag mo sa tao na yon? And usually, you know what they will say? Yung tao na yon is a strong person. And I just tell them, hindi ba yun naman ang ginagawa mo ngayon? So you're a strong person. So let's start with that. No? Let's start with the premise, yung we acknowledge the truth about yourself right now. You are a strong person. The mere fact that you are in front of me right now, you're asking me this question and trying to figure out what to do next, that says a lot about you, how strong you are. No? And with that, the other steps na. Okay? So sometimes kasi we fail to acknowledge ourselves, yung strengths natin. Now,
Yes.
we try, naturally for us to look at the negative side. So we fail to sometimes acknowledge our strengths. No? So let's start with your strong point, which is you're a strong person. So from there, let's do the other steps. And now, thank you.
All right. Yun,
All
strong
right.
tayo, guys. Kaya we go beyond brokenness, diba? We don't stay stuck there. Okay, so the
Yeah.
next question. Mhm.
Okay. Next question. I always encounter broken people and I get attracted to them. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Any thoughts on this?
Alex, would you like to take the
Alex, would you like
question?
to answer?
Um, I'm not quite sure what you mean by attracted to. I don't know if you mean romantically. Like, thank you for candidly sharing this. Um, I'm not quite sure where you're coming from, but I would say that seeing this question, I commend you maybe for your compassion and that you can see people beyond for what they seem to be at that moment. And usually that's something that's not easy to do, and maybe something that we can be more mindful of doing, to not just judge people for for the impression that they may seem to be giving us at that moment. And that takes grace. And I see that um, you want to be able to, I don't know if it means that you're attracted because you want to heal them or to help them. So I guess in that sort of sense, you would have a heart for them. um in the good or bad thing, I think it, in terms of like maybe being attracted to people who maybe are toxic or broken in the sense that they're not very healthy, I think I'd have to throw it to Sir Floyd for that. But yes,
Or-
having a very compassionate and merciful outlook to people is very commendable, and trying to be a safe space for them is very good. But just know when you might have to recommend them to somebody who might need professional help already, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I think the others, Marini and Coach K, might have something to say as well. Then afterwards, I think Floyd can mention, when we think, how do we know that we already need help, professional help? Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to share. I read somewhere, about the messianic complex, where sometimes we just have this need, or we feel like we want to save people, right? And I think, particular to this question, it's really neither a good thing or a bad thing. I think, though, you want to watch out for what it can actually do to yourself, because when you try to help somebody, you kind of are asking to help carry that burden. And if you're not prepared to do that, that can also affect you negatively. So I think that's what you want to just watch out for when you want to help people. But helping people is always a good thing, right? You just want to make sure that you're helping both them and yourself in the process. And then you talk to somebody professionally for things that you can't really help them with. And really, you have to be honest with that. You can't take all of the burden if that's not something you can carry.
Mm.
Yes, and to add to what Kay said about the messianic complex, a lot of the times when we enter into friendships or relationships, if we have the intention to want to control that person, or we want to fix that person, that is where we need to look into our intentions, whether it is good or whether it is having that intention of wanting to fix someone. And oftentimes it's because inwards we have this wanting to control, that we wanted to fix that person. So when we have that, I think we need to look inwards. Like, we need to, it's best to let go. And like, if this person is not doing me good for my mental health, like, I would rather um put myself with the five people who can help me, that can support me with my mental health, rather than five people that can make my mental health worse with toxicity. And we need to, having that helping intention is good, but if it's beyond what we can do, beyond our capabilities, then we can only put it at so much, at a limit, that we shouldn't we shouldn't risk our mental health as well, because we need to take care of ourselves. So for this, I would suggest that if you have suggested to let them go see someone else, and then they don't want to, they still want to stick with you, then perhaps for your sanity and for your mental health, it's probably best to leave it to the professionals at that. So yeah, Floyd, would you like to add?
Okay, thank you. I think everyone has mentioned very good points already. So I'll just summarize and just add, one or two lang. I think it's not good or bad. It's more of how is it affecting me, So if it's affecting me in such a way that it's also parang affecting how I function, no? And kasi if we are going to help other people, it's also good to consider yung condition natin, no? So because sometimes out of goodwill and our compassion and the want the willingness to help others, sometimes we can go overboard doing something that we really cannot handle, and that ends up, I mean, badly even for the person that we're helping, no? So siguro yung acceptance and really knowledge of up to how far can we help, no? So siguro up to where can I help this person? Is it through listening? Okay, sige, listen muna ako, and referral to another person, then hanggang dun lang muna, no? And if I cannot do more than that, at least what I can do, that's what I will give this person, no? Um, and then for the others now, we have to also ask help from other people to help the person we're helping, especially if we're already limited, no? Because of the situation, and because there are things really that are outside of our control, no? So I think those are the few points that I would like to add. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you to our panelists for your insights.
Okay.
Okay, for our next question, so how do you explain the beauty of death and accepting God's will to a non-believer, especially if this person is a friend, colleague, or loved one?
I think in this particular question, one of the things that has really helped and worked for us was that you don't really explain it like you're preaching. People are so turned off by that, right? I think if you honestly just share your truth and share your story, people will appreciate that journey more. So it's not about pushing God into somebody who is not ready to hear and understand God's love, but at least by sharing your story and saying that it's really our surrender and reliance to God's will that has helped us cope with this the best, that seed is planted. And we all know how God waters the seeds that we plant, right? So I think that is a combination where you're asked to say your truth and share your experience, and then let God do the rest. So, it's one of those things that's awkward even, but I think it's worth sharing your story, especially if there was a very good encounter with God in it. And if you that friend is a friend, a colleague, and a loved one, not even a stranger, I think they're going to be more open to your honesty and your truth. So I think that's even a better situation than just talking to a stranger, at least from my experience.
Okay, thank you, Coach K. Alex, would you like to share?
Um, this is kind of a, yeah, thank you for the question. I also lost my dad in a very unexpected way, 2018. Um, and I like how maybe the person who's asking this has that hope for wanting to maybe give hope to something that is very painful or difficult. But yes, to add on to what was really very well mentioned a while ago, try not to be preachy at first. And if ever you really want to form a connection with this person, try to listen first. And I think with anything that's difficult, address their pain points first, because sometimes maybe they want to be heard, or they want to see if you can hold space for them and see where they're coming from. Because while it's very good to share your story, it will be quite difficult if they're not in a disposition to hear it. So you try to see if they're in an open disposition to hear it. And more than that, see if you can meet them from where they're coming from. Because a lot of times I think people forget that it can it can be a form of a work of mercy or love if you just sit with somebody in their suffering. Like you don't necessarily have to talk first. Show that you can be with them as they suffer or as they grieve, and just be it if you can, and if it's appropriate, a safe space for them in that moment. Acknowledge it, um, and then afterwards maybe see if they'll be open to exploring things that you might want to share with them that maybe are on a more positive note, if you see that it matches that. But and maybe to just also add the healing to, maybe you can encourage them also, like have help them have non-zero days. It's something that I read and heard of, like at least help them to do something to help themselves and their healing, like whatever that might be. Like try to show God's mercy through yourself and your presence and your actions. And then they will see that through your consistent behavior, that there's something deeper than for you than death just stopping at a loss. And maybe they'll be able to trust you and be more comfortable talking about faith with you if you can show God's healing and um, hope through your behavior with them, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So before we end, is there anyone who'd want to say any last mentions or words about to close the panel discussion? Or we're all good na then. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us for the first block of the conference, filling emptiness within. Okay. So we would love to hear your feedback and thoughts about this session. We will be flashing soon the debriefing form. Okay, so that we'll flash that later. And yeah, we'd also like to invite you to the next block. Kenneth, would you like to
Yes.
introduce the details
So
about it?
yes, definitely. So thank you so much everyone for joining us this morning. So we hope to see you in our next healing block about acceptance and self-love. That's at 2 p.m. Please join us later in the live stream on the Beyond Brokenness Facebook group.
Yeah. Okay. And then I'll also just mention about the debriefing form. I'll flash that again later. But and to close, we will just have a prayer by prayer by Alex Escobar. Okay, Alex.
If I may read this, I took this from an Instagram post from Anthony Gurula, and I'll just read it. So, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. This is sort of a prayer talking to God. So it says, "You are a lover of my presence. Where could I go from your spirit? Where could I flee from your presence? Is there a place too far that your goodness refuses me? If I make my bed in hell, somehow I still see your face. If I make my bed in heaven, somehow I see your face just the same. If I make my bed in the bed of another, you offer to wash me clean. If I make my bed in the depths of depression, your eternal joy offers me compassion. If I make my bed in suicidal thoughts, your love holds me so that they don't become actions. If I make my bed in my past, your mercy offers me a future. If I make my bed in the miscarriage of your presence, your love is making all things new. If I make my bed in suffering, your love shows me your own healed scars. If I make my bed in one bad decision, may your love be my next one. One of the most dangerous things about ourselves is our ability to choose. And one of the most dangerous things about God is that He will let you. And yet, even in that decision, He isn't too far. For when we disregard His presence, He is a lover of ours. I'll just conclude with a Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Holy Mary, whole handmaid of the Lord, seat of wisdom, pray for us. Saint Joseph, pray for us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex, for that prayer. Um yeah. So I'll just flash the evaluation form. Actually, the briefing form is just more of what are the things that you'd want to share with us. And of course, for the questions that we were not able to answer, we hope to address them in Beyond Kilig's upcoming activities throughout the year. And you may also email us at beyondkiligph@gmail.com. Let me just put that here if you guys have other questions or concerns. The panelists, they also have access to Padlet, so they'll also see if they can answer some of those questions via comment. Okay, so here's the QR code for the debriefing form. Okay, you guys can scan that. Okay, so that ends everything. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you later at 2 p.m. for the block 2 on self love and acceptance. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye.